How's it going, Knicks fans? Welcome back to Fireside Knicks with your boys, Ryan and Alex. That's myself. And we're talking about RJ Barrett today. And RJ Barrett, is he a trade option for the Knicks? Is he going to be a guy that the Knicks are trying to move? Or are we still confident that RJ Barrett can come around and showcase his quality? Now, he was bad in 2022, 2023. It was objectively a bad season. A lot of his numbers regressed. We're going to discuss that, where we think the problems lie, and ultimately kind of, what the Knicks can do to help him turn things around. We know RJ Barrett is extremely talented. We've seen the flashes of brilliance. We've seen him shoot efficiently and do all the things you want from a player of his caliber. And he's just turned 23 years old. He's super, super young. Obviously a player that we've seen come up big in big moments, but he's also flopped in big moments. And I think that's part of the developmental process for some players. But we need him to step up now. This is the window. You got Jalen Brunson, a superstar point guard. Maybe the Knicks bring in a big name this offseason. They got to compete right now. They have a window. RJ Barrett can't be a liability. He can't be a vulnerability. So we're going to discuss kind of his growth, what's going to happen here, what we think will happen, and our perspectives. But Ryan, before we dive into the good stuff, how you do today, my friend?
I'm doing good. Alex, I think you're a man who needs no introduction at this point. But, when it comes to RJ Barrett, it's such an interesting conversation because, as you mentioned, he's 22 years old. He's someone who's shown flashes, right? Like, we see stretches where it's like, oh, my God, RJ Barrett's here. And then it just completely regresses. It falls off a cliff. And you're like, what happened? Like 2 years ago, RJ Barrett was one of the best shooters on the team. He shot over 40% from three on pretty good volume. The year after that, he regressed a little bit in percentage, but took a huge leap in volume. It looked like he really established himself as a three-point shooter, and now it's completely regressed. He's a below-average shooter again, right? And so, what is RJ Barrett? And as you mentioned, this team is trying to win now. We're no longer in the stage of development, rebuilds, X, Y, Z, whatever it may be. This team is trying to win basketball games. This team is trying to contend for a title. The New York Knicks followed up their last playoff appearance by signing veterans. It didn't work their way they wanted it to, but they were able to quickly rebound from really a year where everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Randall regressed and got hurt. They didn't get a lot of production from the rookies that year. Quickly regressed from three that year. None of your veterans were really good. Fournier was horrible defensively and was a bad fit for the Knicks, it turned out to be. Mitch obviously spent some time injured, but it feels like he does that every year, so I wouldn't call that like disaster territory. But that year wasn't great for the Knicks. They were able to rebound. They made the right adjustments and they looked really good this year. But, if you look at the trio of Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson, and RJ Barrett, that trio actually had a negative net rating last year. And obviously, first off, Jalen Brunson is not the reason for that. We obviously know that. But even the pairing of Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle had a positive net rating. So is Julius Randle really the reason why that trio doesn't work? The numbers would point to RJ Barrett being the reason why that trio didn't work. And you can't go into next year with your top three guys in terms of your scoring options and your three starters that you consider your main stars having a negative net rating again. The Knicks were a 108 or 109 defensive rating with RJ Barrett off the court. It was 118 with him on the court. That is such a significant difference, guys. We're talking about going from one of the best defenses in the NBA to one of, if not the worst defense in the NBA. Barrett was really bad defensively for the Knicks, and it was clear that whenever they went to Quickly or Hart to replace him in the lineup, they immediately took massive leaps defensively. From three, the Knicks were not very good last year. It showed in the postseason, and while RJ Barrett did perform better in the postseason than he did in the regular season, in terms of true shooting percentage, he was still below average. In terms of defense, he was still below average. And as a whole, yes, he was the Knicks' second best player, but that was more so because of an absence of performance from other guys, right? Right now, if you look at performance and look at guys and you're projecting for next year, the best players in the Knicks probably go as Brunson, Randall, Quickly, Mitchell Robinson, Josh Hart. I'm assuming Josh Hart comes back. Was RJ Barrett better than Quentin Grimes for the Knicks last year? I would say he's less integral to their success. Quentin Grimes was the best defensive player on the Knicks last year and their most important defensive player. He took on the toughest defensive assignments from any player in the NBA last season. And when we hear rumors about, formerly Bradley Beal, then it's probably going to shift to Zach LaVine. You hear some rumors with Embiid. You hear some rumors with Cat. You hear some rumors with Zion, right? If you acquire one of these guys, someone takes the bench. Now, Cat and Embiid would obviously just be a Mitchell Robinson swap in terms of the starting lineup. But if we acquire a Zach LaVine, right, he's going to either be the 2 or the 3. Are you going to really sit Quentin Grimes to have Brunson, LaVine, Barrett, Randall in the same lineup? I assume one of Barrett or Randall are traded, but still, let's say that's Randall. Brunson, LaVine, and Barrett are going to get 140 dropped on them. Jason Tatum's going to drop 30, 40 points on that. Jaylen Brown will drop 30, 40 points on that. I don't even want to know what Giannis would do to that. I don't want to even think about that. That scares me. That sends chills down my spine in the wrong way. Barrett just doesn't work in that system, right? You would rather have Quentin Grimes in there. So we're talking about 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 players in the New York Knicks that are more integral to the success right now That's a problem, right? And for RJ Barrett, I get that he's young, but is he going to make that development as a third option on the New York Knicks and a defensive liability? I don't think so. I want to know what you think, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, look, the defensive liability is kind of obvious. RJ Barrett himself has said, I want to be an all NBA defensive player. Unfortunately, that's not possible, right? It's not possible because he hasn't taken the developmental steps. But also, is this a Tom Thibodeau issue? Like, do we need to ask ourselves, is this a coaching issue? Because RJ Barrett is talented. He was taking big steps forward. You mentioned earlier the 40% clip from beyond the arc in 2020. He was 20 years old. I mean, logically speaking, it's hard to justify a player reducing that much. He's gotten 9% worse since then, right? Is that a coaching problem? Is this not an RJ Barrett problem? Is this they're not using him in the right sequences? Is this offense not really tailored for him? Is the spacing not right? Are they not having him attack his strengths? Are they trying to force feed him shooting reps, from beyond the arc? They're trying to make him into a shooter when he's more of a driver. He's more of a paint dominator. I'd love to see him kind of develop more of an elbow shot. And I think that's kind of like what I would love to see from RJ Barrett, right? Like the spacing is obviously great. You want those elite three-point shooters. But RJ Barrett's never going to be an elite three-point shooter. Like, that's just not his game. It never was. I think that one season where he hit 40%, a lot of those shots came from way in the corner. You know what I mean? Like way in the corner on the boundary, essentially, where he was hitting most of those shots. I know you guys remember that. He's not good from the top of the key. He's not good from the kind of the sides. He's just good from the boundary. That's where he really hits the majority of those shots. So what I'd like to see is getting him in the position to expand upon that specifically, putting him in the corner, but also asking him to extrapolate on his skill set as a driver. Using that left hand. He's not that bad with his right hand either. It's developed a lot over the last couple of years. But I'd love to see him kind of develop more of a mid-range game. He always backs in ISO. Use that speed and athleticism to kind of bait opposing defenders into thinking he's going to drive and pull up for those shots, and then crash the boards. The Knicks got out-muscled a lot at times in the playoffs, but they are a very good rebounding team. Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson, Mitch was injured for a little portion of the year, but, you can get those offensive rebounds if you're putting in the effort, in my opinion. But RJ Barrett right now, I have to say, just based on the way he's regressed the last 2 years, I have to say I think it's more of a coaching problem than it is an RJ Barrett problem at times in specific categories in terms of how they're using him. But RJ Barrett's in charge of, fixing those problems, deciding those things and getting the best out of himself. So I'll ask you this. Based on his value right now, do you think that he is a net negative or a net positive? You're hoping for a big turnaround season, right? You're hoping that RJ Barrett can spin it around and become a positive impact player for this Knicks team. And I think that what I'd like to say is, depending on who the Knicks get this offseason, his role will change slightly and could fit him better and take some of the pressure off of him. They were expecting him to be that number 3. I don't think he's going to be the number 3. I think he's got to be a number 4. In terms of just the reliance on his production. I think that's ultimately where I rank him. He's a good number 4 player. You can rely on off the bench as a nice role player. He can be aggressive. If other players are kind of going cold, he can pick up the slack. That's where I see him kind of helping. But I think that right now, if you were to rank the guys on this team in terms of overall, who I trust the most, it'd be Jalen Brunson. I think it would be obviously Julius Randle. And I think that I honestly, right now, I want to keep feeding reps to Grimes. I think Grimes could be a really great player. I think Grimes could be better than RJ Barrett. I genuinely believe that because Grimes, as you mentioned, was arguably our best defender last year. He's only getting better. I think his shooting is getting better. He's hitting some big timely shots. He was injured during the postseason. He had that shoulder issue. I think that with more experience and more opportunities, he's going to get better. And because he's such a good defender, because he's such a good shooter, I think that he's going to surpass RJ Barrett as an impact player. Maybe I'm wrong. And for what it's worth, I hope I am. I hope that both of them are just phenomenal and they can both be great. But RJ Barrett has to turn it around. And I think that it's primarily, you could say it's split. Maybe it's half him, it's half the coaching staff. Do I want to trade him? No, I don't think that I would prefer to trade him because I think there's a lot of potential and I'd hate for him to go to another team and suddenly find his groove and find that quality. But if the right deal came around, if the right trade came off across the Knicks plate, I would be willing to include him. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I actually, you know what? I'm going to sit here and say that the Quentin Grimes take you just had is phenomenal. I 100% agree on that Quentin Grimes point. People say, oh, well, RJ's 22. So is Quentin Grimes. And Quentin Grimes has had less time in the NBA. And if you think about it, his first year, he really wasn't factored into the rotation much until later in the season. In year two really was his first year in the league, it felt like. First time really being relied upon. And, I mean, again, he just took off. Guys, this is a guy who went from, kind of a non-factor last year to this year being asked to take on the most difficult defensive assignments in all of basketball, right? His three-point shooting, his volume, his shot creation, his ability to get to the paint. He looks like a really polished NBA player. Taking that year 3 leap, could he go out there and average, 14 to 15 points a game? Absolutely. And I think that his 14 to 15 points per game alongside his defense will be more impactful than RJ Barrett's 20 points per game. And I think he'll do it more efficiently as well. What I really propose to the Knicks to have next year is whether it's Julius Randle, or Joel Embiid type, Zion, whatever it may be, the guy who you pair with Jalen Brunson is what I'm going to label this player as, right? Jalen Brunson and the guy you pair him with, surround that with Mitch as the center likely, unless it's Embiid, of course, then, that would be a natural switch right there. But you surround that team with shooting. You surround that team with spacing. This is the model that's working in the NBA now. The time of the big three is no longer a thing. It's not like the Knicks really ever had a big three, but you can't go out there and try to sign 3 Hall of Fame players, right? Like that's not, the CBA does not want teams doing that anymore. I imagine that was in reaction to the Golden State Warriors doing what they did and absolutely dominating basketball for really those 2 years. No one else felt like they had a chance. And the Raptors won that title, which they deserved. There's no asterisk, but they won it because KD got hurt. If KD doesn't get hurt, I think the Warriors win that title. But kind of looking at what the Knicks do really well, the Knicks are really gritty. For as much as I feel like Tom Thibodeau can, struggle with optimizing certain players, that team will fight. That team is gritty. That team is hard-nosed. That team resembles New York. That team, I think Tom Thibodeau is the perfect coach for what the Knicks are currently. We'll see how that changes as the years go by. But, I think he's probably our most successful coach in recent memory, just winning a playoff series and actually winning games. I mean, I got to give him credit for that. You mentioned, the brilliance of Jalen Brunson, right? Jalen Brunson, obviously a phenomenal scorer, can score in the paint with his floater, can score from mid-range, obviously great from 3. You pair that with guys like Grimes who can shoot. We've been talking and raving about Dante DiVincenzo. You add a guy like that to the starting lineup. I ask you this, would you, if you replaced RJ with Dante DiVincenzo last year, I think the Knicks win more games. People may go well, you're going to lose 10 points per game. That 10 points per game with those shot attempts get distributed to guys like Quentin Grimes, to guys like Jalen Brunson, to guys like Julius Randle, to maybe even Mitch lobs or whatever it may be. And I think you get more efficient scoring, right? It's not about just points per game. Points per game is a metric that matters, right? How much you score and your volume of scoring does matter. But just putting up a lot of points per game doesn't inherently make you a good player. How you get those points, what you do on the defensive end, your shot creation, your gravity, all those things really matter. Basketball is not just about throwing 5 of the highest scoring players on the same team. It's a synergy-based game, and how you work with other guys definitely matters. If you put Jalen Brunson, let's say, I'm going to say Zion, for example, because I really like Zion, and I think that that's a realistic star fit. I think if we look at all the options in terms of, best players available and just like the likelihood the Knicks could trade for him, I think Zion's the top guy. Jalen Brunson and Zion paired with a Quentin Grimes, with a Dante DiVincenzo, and then Mitch on the glass to help with rebounding, give them more size and give them physicality, right? That's a really good team. That team's got the shooting. That team has the defense. That team would be unbelievable defensively. Those are 3 guys right there in DiVincenzo, Grimes, and Mitch who are not going to be asked to carry the load offensively and are going to take on tough defensive assignments. Zion is an athletic player who can go out and shot block for you. And then Jalen Brunson's really your only negative defender, but Jalen Brunson's one of the most efficient scorers in the sport. You preserve your bench depth with at least guys like Grimes, Hartenstein, and Quickly, Hartenstein, and Hart, and you build around that bench, and that team suddenly looks like a contender. That team stays healthy, and how many teams in the East are really better than that team, right? And that's really the issue with RJ Barrett. It's the fact that you can't really ask him to be the third option because, number one, I don't really think that's fair to him at this point. I think he works better on a different team as a second option. And end of the day, the Knicks need the shooting and they need the defense, and RJ Barrett can't provide that right now. And if he can't provide that right now, I can't bank on him getting better because we're in year 5, right? We're at a point where it had to have happened last year, and it didn't happen last year. And the Knicks need results now. This team can't take a step back. They take a step back, and some you're gonna feel unease. This team wants to win now, and I think that happens with better shooting and better defense. And I don't think RJ Barrett is the better shooter or the better defender that this team needs to build around.
I mean, look, it's possible that RJ Barrett's kind of a late bloomer, and he comes around when he's like 25 years old, but he's 23 right now. And as you said, if the Knicks have a chance to make a move that's going to help them win games now and is going to be better than RJ Barrett, I think you have no choice but to include him. I have a certain affinity for RJ because he's a great dude. Like, he's just a great guy, like a really good guy. He has the work ethic. He really cares. He loves playing in New York. Like, he's everything you want in a player, especially a Knick. He doesn't talk crap to the media. He doesn't go crazy. He takes accountability. He's really calm. He's collective. You know, I really feel like RJ is a great fit for this Knicks team as a culture guy, as a role player. It's just the growth hasn't been there. So unfortunately, you have to make that like business decision, that winning decision, that if there is a player that comes across our table, our desk, and RJ Barrett's a part of the combination of players that needs to go, I think you have to pull the trigger. But in a perfect world, you wouldn't, and he would remain on this team, and he would take a big step forward, and he becomes an impact player for us and a guy that we can trust. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know what needs to happen. But I do like RJ Barrett. I think he's a great guy, and I know a lot of you guys want to keep him. I know that, you know, he's super, super young still, and a lot of players, it takes time for them to blossom and grow into the players we know they can be, but he's gotten worse since he's been 20 years old. So there is something to consider there. There is the numbers to support our claims and our perspectives. But as always, I'm happy to hear your perspectives below in the YouTube comments. Over the next couple of days, we're going to be taking a look at a couple players. I know, Ryan, you mentioned Dante DiVincenzo. I really want to do a deep dive into him, what he'd offer this Knicks team, kind of what's going on there. He's a Villanova player, a lot of chemistry with Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson. So personally, seems like a really good fit, and he's a high-octane three-point shooter, and the Knicks need spacing, they need shooters, and he's a good defender too. So you love to see that. This is a player that I'd love for the Knicks to go out and get, but obviously we have a couple of priorities, so we'll talk about him, talk about some recent reports indicating Obi Toppin could be on the market, so those are a couple segments that are going to be coming up over the next couple days. But as always, love you guys, enjoy this day. You know, it's nice to be kind of in a period where we're building to be a competitor. We're building to be a contender. And I think that's where we want to be. It's been a long time waiting. And it's good to be a Knicks fan right now where we're talking about who we need to make this team a championship caliber team and not what we need to do just to be competitive. So it's definitely a good situation to be in. But as I said, make sure to like and subscribe as always.